From blocking bridges to economic boycotts, direct action is increasingly common as people become frustrated with their government's failure to confront Israel's assault on Gaza. But can direct action succeed where other methods have not? I'm Myriam Francois, and this is The Stream.
All persons remaining will be arrested.
Have a responsibility as people in the imperial court to make a clear stand against it.
For the forced starvation!
Ceasefire, not genocide!
You are a war criminal!
Stand with us! Stand, stand, we show up for Palestine!
Just to be clear, this is our last warning.
We're asking for your voluntary cooperation.
Direct action refers to the use of economic or physical power to achieve specific goals, and it has come to define the tactics of a new generation of Palestinian advocates. So who are the people behind it, and why is it their preferred mode of protest? Joining me to explore this are Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the woman-led peace group Codepink and a leading figure in the US peace movement. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. From London, Lowkey, hip-hop artist and activist who is a member of Palestine Action. And from New York, Ashish Prashar, a political strategist, human rights activist and founder of the No Tax for Genocide campaign. Welcome to you all. Thank you for being with us. Medea, can I start with you by asking how and why you got involved in direct action?
Well, let me first say that I'm not the new generation. I'm the older generation, having started direct action back in the 1960s during the Vietnam War, when our government was sending young men overseas to kill people they didn't even know. And we felt that we had to do whatever we could to stop the draft, to stop our government, to get the attention of the American public. And I've been involved in it ever since. During the Iraq War, we did the same thing. Why is our government taking us to war on the basis of lies? We, the public, have to get out there and do something about it. And now that the U.S. government is so complicit in this genocide in Gaza, we have to do everything that we can to stop that complicity. So I think direct action is one of the most important tools that we can use, putting our bodies on the line, trying to get the media attention, trying to wake up the public to say, we've got to stop this.
Lowkey, what's your relationship to direct action and what's the idea behind it?
Well, in the case of Palestine Action, what we are arguing is that Britain should adhere to the provisions of Article 1 of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. All parties to the convention are under obligation to prevent the occurrence of genocide and punish those responsible for its commission. Now, is Britain fulfilling its obligations in accordance with international law? The Arms Trade Treaty, which Britain is a signator and ratifier of, stipulates that if exports are thought to possibly be used for violations of international humanitarian law, they should not proceed. Now, in the case of Israel's genocide in Gaza, Britain provides components for the F-16, that's the HUD technology, which Israel uses for targeting in that fighter jet. But it also provides components for the F-35, the Apaches, snipers, and also the vast majority of small arms ammunitions comes from Elbit Systems, which is Israel's largest arms company, which has numerous sites across this country. Now, in the case of Palestine Action, it has been produced out of the intransigence and inflexibility of the British political system. If we had a political system that responded to the views of the vast majority of the population, supporting a ceasefire, supporting banning arms being exported to Israel, then there would be no need for a direct action organization like Palestine Action, which goes directly into the factories and stops them from functioning, at least temporarily. But in a few cases, we have seen the permanent debilitation of several of these arms factories. Now, this is not just a legal obligation, as I have laid out before, but also I view it as a moral obligation in our current situation that we are in. And of course, direct action was the very way that people for 300 years in this country agitated to gain the right to vote for parliamentary representation. You would not have women and people that do not own property having the right to vote for parliamentary representation without direct action in this country. In fact, so many.
Yeah, and we'll come back to some of those points very shortly. Ashish, can you tell us about the No Tax for Genocide campaign?
Yeah, so a lot of the work we do, and especially in the group I'm in, this coalition of lawyers, former political strategists, people, who worked with the Middle East peace envoy, a lot of the work is actually limited to, a handful of people, right? So some of the stuff we're doing is universal jurisdiction cases, right? And only a handful of lawyers can prosecute them, can bring them to court, and can hold, America, Britain, and anyone accountable. And, we've heard countless times that the vast protests across Britain, America, everywhere else in the world, what more can I do? So we looked really hard at the law. And I believe the law is power that can be used on behalf of emancipatory struggles and can be wielded in service of political movements like ours for liberation, right? And it's because this is a genocide. And I'll give you the background. This is important to set up why this campaign is legal. 34,000 people were killed, 1.2 million people were displaced. That was the beginning of the Bosnian genocide. We have surpassed that with Gaza. It's over 40,000. We don't even know how many people are under the rubble. It's 15,000 of them are children. 2 million people have been displaced. And the US and the UK have aided and abetted in these war crimes. The ICJ has already ruled it a plausible genocide, which, if anyone knows anything about international law, it's basically declaring it's a genocide. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights, confirmed in her report a couple of weeks ago that it's a genocide. And what you're also not seeing is the UK and the US not putting up any of their genocide experts, any of their lawyers to say it's not. Even though the governments repeatedly keep saying we don't believe it's a genocide, no one with legal background or expertise in this space or a scholar in this space from either administration or government is willing to put their name to say it's not this thing. So we gave the public an opportunity to use that ruling, that environment, to actually take another form of direct action, which is tax resistance. In the UK's case, there are laws that allow us to design a way for you as a citizen to show your muscle and show, the politicians who they really work for. And we both know, thanks to Lowkey setting it all up there as well, the UK specifically is aided and abetted in these war crimes. And you, as an individual or a business, are funding those war crimes. And funding war crimes is illegal. And tax is not exempt under UK law. And now the campaign, which launched in March, is based on 2 UK statute laws, the ICC Act, which make it a criminal offence in the UK for any person to engage in war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, conduct ancillary to those crimes. And the Terrorism Act of 2000 does not exclude taxation in the criminalisation of funding of those mass atrocities. Mm-hmm. Now, there is one last part. You do still pay your taxes. You actually just withhold your taxes.
Thanks for clarifying, Ashish. So April 15th is the global strike for Palestine, when activists across the world are calling on people to make themselves heard.
On April 15th, people across 4 continents will launch an economic blockade in solidarity with Palestine. Through this coordinated mobilization, we will jam up trade choke points and disrupt the global economy. 30 cities and counting have joined the effort. This comes as Yemen is bombed to secure global trade routes and billions of dollars continue to fund the occupation. The time has come to open up new fronts against the Zionist war machine. It's time for collective risk.
Lowkey, why do you think we're seeing this growth in forms of direct action among Palestinian supporters versus other more formal routes of dissent?
In the case of Israel, we have seen during the war on Gaza, German exports of arms to Israel increase by up to 1,000%. Even the setting up of a special streamline way of providing weaponry. We've also seen the United States, regardless of its PR exercises and attempts to try and beautify its policy for public consumption, we've seen the US constantly arming Israel to the hilt. In the case of Britain, we've seen the British government go against the advice it's been given by its own lawyers that Israel is breaking international law in Gaza by continuing to arm Israel. And in all of those countries, you have seen massive demonstrations on the street, but you have seen essentially a political system which does not respond to that pressure. And so for that reason, people are becoming more and more creative and more original in their ways of interrupting and disrupting this passage of power.
Yeah.
Also, they are looking precisely at infrastructure. And I think that is an interesting space for direct action.
Well, on the point about creative action, Medea, I want to bring you in and ask you a little bit about the forms of creative action that you and your group are partaking in. And also, if you can tell me whether there's been an evolution in the forms of direct action that you're engaged in.
Well, first, I want to respond to some issues that Lowkey brought up about not being, that our politicians do not represent us. A couple of weeks after the initial October 7th action by Hamas, there was an AP poll that showed that 66% of the American public wanted a ceasefire, 80% of Democrats. And yet at that time in Congress, when there was a resolution for a ceasefire, less than 5% of Congress signed on to that resolution. And since then, it has been the same thing. We are totally unrepresented by the people in Congress. And so you have, and that's what we have been doing. I have been going with groups of people into the halls of Congress every single day for the last 6 months. And we're trying to show what is the thinking and who are these people beholden to. We see Israeli flags outside of their offices in Congress, and we say, who are you representing? Are you representing the United States, or are you representing the Israeli government? We go in their offices with placards that say how much money they are getting from the pro-Israel lobby groups like AIPAC. We follow them down the halls, what we call bird dogging, and ask them directly, why are you supporting more weapons to Israel? And we have them saying horrific things like Congressman Brian Mast, who said to us, we should not be sending a penny in humanitarian aid, that all of the people in Gaza are responsible. They voted for this terrorist organization, Hamas. And so Israel needs to do what it needs to do, and we should be helping them. And so we have to show the American public who these people are, who they're responding to, who is paying for their campaigns, and how out of touch they are for reality of what's going on, and how heartless they are. So we go into the hearings, we interrupt them, we go to their homes. In San Francisco, at the home of Nancy Pelosi, we've been lying down in the streets. And yes, we've seen an evolution because she has finally, unbelievably, signed on to a letter saying that we should withhold weapons to Israel. This is because of direct action.
Ashish, I want to ask you, because of the work that you do, you're a former advisor to the UK Middle East peace envoy. You've worked with the likes of Tony Blair and Barack Obama. How are these forms of action received in the halls of power?
I mean, they detest them. I mean, ideally, they want this to go away. And I actually think here's the reason. I mean, they've created this environment where all this is possible. Everything Lowkey and Medea are saying is possible because they have ignored us, because they don't believe we'll care. Like, and I love that Medea brought Nancy Pelosi up, because she said something really, really disgusting at one of those protests. All these people are paid by the Chinese to be here. All these people are like paid by Russia to be here. The thing is, it's kind of like every accusation is a confession, right? They're all paid by somebody else to care about something, not us. They can't believe that us human beings actually care about other human beings across the world. We care that we don't want babies to be massacred. They care that we don't want entire family lines wiped out. And they can't see through their own money and who they're paid for to be in those offices. And this doesn't run deep with just institutional Democrats or conservatives in Britain, or centrist Labour people like Keir Starmer. This is everybody. This is progressives. Look at what Bernie Sanders has said. Look what AOC said. And they only changed their tone in the last few weeks. And even then, they still don't go far enough. Bernie Sanders still thinks Golda Meir's era of Israel is good. She wiped out so many Palestinians. AOC took her how long to call this a genocide? And then the irony of AOC is she used to call for Trump people to have direct action, chasing them down the hallways and everything else. And you should get used to this. But when this happened to her, she was like, oh my God, you can't do this. This is not right.
Yeah.
Well, she's equally as culpable because she voted for arms to go to Israel.
Yeah.
She's defunded UNRWA, all this stuff that she is also culpable for. So we're not represented by anyone at the moment. And the reason they have gone with it, the reason the Biden administration has pushed for so long and think they're going to break through it is every other issue, sadly, that we have mobilized around, that we have, as a society, cared about. We do eventually, quote unquote, lose interest, or people get exhausted and tired, right? And that's historically happened. Like a great example of this BLM stuff in 2020. And I think Biden used that moment of, we're all so angry at Trump. He was our great relief. And I think a lot of us in America, at least, when he got elected with COVID going on, BLM happening, we all took a sigh of, it was a massive relief moment.
Yeah.
And then we didn't lose interest in the BLM stuff, but we just kind of lost momentum. Now, with this, we're all waking up every morning watching, again, children being blown to bits, families being torn apart, all this stuff. And and we know that everyone is culpable. The information that Medea and Lowkey put out there, every politician culpable. There is no going away. They think this will go away by November. This is not stopping.
So
and I think they've misjudged the public.
Their fatigue is not going to take over, is what you're saying. Well, look, direct action can come with risks, as one Codepink activist recently found out.
Please, I'm begging you, don't defund UNRWA. It's what's keeping the Palestinians alive.
So, Leslie, there was a hearing that you stood up and you tried to defend UNRWA because the people in the hearing in Congress were trying to defund UNRWA. And so what happened?
So I stood up and I pleaded with Congress people who were in the hearing to not defund UNRWA. And I just pleaded, please, please, please don't defund UNRWA.
And you got arrested.
And I got arrested. I'm the only one that's being taken to trial.
So you're going to have to go to court to defend yourself for trying to make sure that UNRWA got refunded so that they could feed starving people.
Yes, because the people of Gaza are starving.
Medea, I want to ask you about the forms of direct action that you're preparing for. You're about to join a flotilla to sail to Gaza to try and break the siege, are you not? The last flotilla in 2010, did end up with tragic circumstances in which 10 people were killed. How have you come to this decision, and are you concerned at all for your safety and those of your fellow sailors?
Well, of course, I'm concerned for our safety because the Israelis are so insane. But I am very excited about joining this flotilla. I feel very honored to be able to be part of this flotilla. It's just another example of how we have to do whatever we can in a nonviolent fashion, putting our bodies on the line to stop this genocide. And those of us, and there will be many hundreds of us going on this flotilla, are trying to say there is a siege of Gaza that didn't start October 7th. This goes back for now 17 years. And of course, the oppression of Palestinians goes back for 75 years. And we have to wake up our governments. We have to show that we will not allow the Israelis to keep doing this, that we demand a real solution, not just humanitarian aid getting in, not just a ceasefire, but we demand real freedom for the Palestinians. And that's why this flotilla is so important to say, end the siege of Gaza.
But the risks of direct action are also incurred by the companies or governments targeted. Check out this post from Palestine Action. The Tamworth factory used to make Israeli weaponry. Now they only make parts for public transport and are no longer owned by Israel's largest weapons firm. You do not need to beg the powers that be to create change. This was achieved through relentless direct action. Lowkey, can you tell us about the impact that PAL Action has had on arms manufacturers in the UK?
But since the founding of Palestine Action, 77 investors have pulled out of Elbit Systems. The value of Elbit Systems UK shares have fallen by 20%. Elbit sold 2 subsidiaries in this country, Ferranti Technologies in Oldham and Elite KL in Tamworth recently, at a loss. 2 factories in this country were shut down permanently because of Palestine Action. Elbit's London HQ was also shut down permanently. Elbit was dumped by its UK recruiter, IO Associates. Elbit Systems was dumped by its website designer, and its contracts were cancelled with property manager Fisher German, and even the logistics company which transported its hardware in this country also cancelled its contracts. So because of the activity of Palestine Action, Elbit Systems has really been rendered a toxic brand in this country. But moreover, it's not just because of the activity of Palestine Action, it's because essentially Israel continues to break an encyclopedia of international laws in its actions towards the Palestinians. So that is the biggest recruiter for Palestine Action, without a doubt.
Ashish, I want to ask you about direct action. Historically, it was used by the suffragettes. It was used in the civil rights movement. Do you think there's a different perception of direct action today when it's being done as compared to how we look at it retrospectively?
I think history's been whitewashed about direct action and other things. I think, if you think about, you only have to use Dr. King's annual holiday here where every politician, even the racist ones, come out and celebrate Dr. King, and they pretend that everything was done peacefully, that nobody ever got killed or nobody ever got hurt or nobody ever put their bodies on the line. I think there's a misconception of how people have got freedom, right? And you can even go back to the fact that, they don't talk about how resistance is legal in armed resistance is legal in international law. Not the right, you can't, is the famous quote of Israel has the right to defend itself. Well, every state has the right to defend itself, but not from people they actually occupy. That's actually illegal in international law. So, I think we've done it. I think the powers that be and history, and whoever's written it, has done a very good job of pretending everything was done peacefully. I don't think people who were in South Africa, who were oppressed by an apartheid regime, did everything peacefully. There was direct action on the ground. There was direct action in the West. There was, there was actual bombings in South Africa by the ANC, the military wing. This is not something that we talk about. We talk about the end. We talk about Mandela, right? We talk about like how he spent 27 years. He came out of prison and everything was happy, right? We don't talk about all the stuff that was done leading up to that often when we engage in that conversation, especially in the West. We don't talk about how Algeria got its freedom from the French. We don't talk about, frankly, the IRA in the detail we should talk about. Jonathan Powell, who was Tony Blair's chief of staff, advocates for talking to resistant groups.
Yeah.
He was the one who negotiated the Good Friday Agreement. And you listen to our politicians today, like there's like oh no, we can't talk to people who resist. We can't talk to people who are violent. We can't talk to people like that. It's deliberately to keep us down. It's a different way of keeping us down. It's a different way to stop uprisings. It's a different way to stop intifada. It's a different way to stop us actually having a difference, because they pin us with history that is actually being completely whitewashed. You talk to anyone from the civil rights era. You talk to anyone who actually was there. Right? They put people on bridges. They did stuff to block trade. They did everything possible to shut the country down. Right? And the problem is we didn't have access to things like this. We didn't have these tools where you can visually see it happen in real time. So they can do their version of recorded history. But if you talk to civil rights leaders, they'll tell you what we're doing today is not abnormal. It is something that has to be done to get voting rights, to get freedom.
Well, Medea, I want to bring you in on a final thought on that. How does what you're seeing today, what you're involved in today, compare to other movements that you yourself have also been involved in?
Well, I think it's part of a history of how we make change in our country and in our world. And yes, we are always criticized when we sleep outside of Nancy Pelosi's home. We're called how rude to go and invade her privacy. There's an encampment that's been going on outside the home of Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. How rude of you to do that. We say it's rude to send 2,000-pound bombs to blow people up in one of the most densely populated places in the world. in Gaza. It's rude to kill journalists and academics and doctors and women and children and all kinds of people. That is what's rude. So we say, go ahead, use your body, put your body on the line, do everything to stop this genocide now.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you to our guests, Medea, Lowkey, and Ashish. And thank you all for watching. Did you enjoy the show? Talk to us on social media. We want to hear from you. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream and we'll look into it. Take care, and I'll see you soon.